I would say generally praiseworthy of some of the ways that Elon Musk has said that he wants to protect free speech and all of that. But his latest foray into the free speech wars actually shows us some of the dangers that you can walk into if you are not fully informed, or at the very least, you are not fully aware of the language that you're using when talking about content moderation. So let's put this up there on the screen. Musk was replying to a tweet from Mike Cernovich, who said, "Here you go, Elon Musk. When Twitter employees invariably lie to you about enforcement policy, maybe they can explain why a verified account is allowed to incite terrorism without any care in the world about being banned." And so here's what Elon replied. Twitter obviously has a strong left-wing bias. I mean, I think that's probably true. But he responds
liberal
this.
Bias,
yes, okay.
not left-wing bias.
Liberal bias. He replies, though, to this. He says, "Like I said, my preference is to hew close to the laws of countries in which Twitter operates. If the citizens want something banned, then pass a law to do so. Otherwise, it should be allowed." Now, that works in a free society, a democratic society like America, and actually then it doesn't really work because the First Amendment, trumps all of those things.
Yeah, we're talking about a constitutional right.
Right, so we have a constitutional right, not an actual democratic right. In order to have free speech, but maybe more in like common law type system like the UK or elsewhere, somewhere in the West, this would more apply as long as there's a general free idea of the types of things that, Germany, for example, has laws on the books like banning Scientology, given their history, whatever. We don't have to debate all of that right now. Here's the problem though. If Elon abides by the standard of we will censor content per whatever the governments say or the laws on the books are in authoritarian or theocratic countries, that becomes a real problem.
Yes.
So in Saudi Arabia, are you going to censor like Shia activists? Well, obviously Twitter doesn't operate in China, but the Chinese government nonetheless put immense amount of pressure on Twitter in order to remove Hong Kong freedom protesters or Uyghur activists or Tibetan activists. And, they spend a lot of money and time going after such people. What about in the Islamic world? Are you going to crack down on people who are speaking out, on more democratic causes?
How about in Israel?
I was about to say,
going to take the Israeli government's word for which account should be censored?
Which actually that has happened in the past. But,
specifically with Facebook in particular has been, bad about that.
Okay, so are you going to allow like pro-Palestinian stuff in Israel? I mean, Israel's a quasi-democratic society, right? I mean, so now what? It's like, well, the Knesset passed it, and you're like, or Knesset, I know Israelis. The Knesset passed it, so now what? Or in Egypt, for example, military dictatorships, like are Muslim Brotherhood accounts going to be allowed? Anyway, I can go on forever. The point is that Twitter and its current policy has actually had very, frankly, has not adhered to this policy at all.
This is way worse than current Twitter.
Has really,
worse.
erred more on the side of allowing, something. Now, look, obviously, a lot of the causes I mentioned are, quasi-liberal in the first place, and so they're kind of sanctioned by, elite liberal mindset. So it's not like they were getting censored in the first place, but you have a serious problem. Actually, Russia is a good example. I think Twitter is still operating in Russia. And if I recall, back in 2014, Twitter, in one of the very first instances of government-issued censorship, began censoring accounts at the behest of the Russian government. The Electronic Freedom Foundation actually wrote about that back in 2014, about the end of the free speech wing of the Free Speech Party. But there's another one. What are you going to do, Elon? And, just yesterday, he met with the European Union and the head of their whatever regulatory agency is over the internet. And remember, they have very, very different standards than we do over here. So, it just shows you this is a real, it's a pickle in terms of how exactly you do these things. And there's a reason that a lot of companies didn't even buy Twitter in the first place because they never wanted to deal with this.
Yeah, I mean, even in Europe, as you're pointing to, this is an issue because you have new laws in the EU. I'm just reading this article from ABC News where they say if his approach will be just stop moderating Twitter, he's going to find himself in legal trouble in the EU. Musk will soon be confronted with Europe's Digital Services Act, which will require big tech companies like Twitter, Google, and Facebook parent Meta to police their platforms more strictly or face billions in fines. So basically, if you take this at face value, effectively he's saying, all right, I'm just going to abide by what the EU has passed at this point. I'm not going to put up a fight here at all. So listen, I think at best, it shows a lack of thoughtfulness, a lack of having really engaged deeply with this issue and what it would mean, not just here, but in a global context. At worst, it signals that he could actually make Twitter worse from a censorship point of view than it ultimately is right now. But between that and what we reported yesterday about his plans, number one, that he is about making that money, and he's also, taking money from some unsavory countries like the nation of Qatar, which is not known for its commitment to free speech. I think it ought to give you some pause about whether or not Elon Musk is really going to be your free speech savior here on Twitter.
Well, it can show you, even if you have good intent, if you're from the West, you're like, yeah, well, we'll just abide by the laws of that country. And it's like, well, that's a serious issue. So, Ryan actually replied to this, Ryan Graham, let's put this up there on the screen. And he's like, are you signaling the Chinese government will be allowed to will be allowed to censor posts taken down by Chinese citizens? Because if so, that's more censorship than currently done by Twitter. Look, it's a very, very thorny topic, and you actually have to be very well considered. And I would personally advocate for a policy which hews to the American First Amendment globally. And dare the European Union. Are they really going to ban Twitter in the EU? Honestly, if you're in the EU, you're probably better off. But
fair.
For your own mental health. But I just don't believe you. I don't believe that they will do it. And look, if Egypt and all these other countries want to boot them off, go ahead. Life finds a way. VPNs these days basically make it so that if you want to, you can basically access anything. And we should just set that standard. And that's how I think that it should govern itself. But it's still going to be tough. He's got a lot of regulatory problems in order to go with.
Yeah, even his comments about Twitter has clear left-wing bias. I mean, like you said, liberal bias for sure. But even that showed a lack of thought and nuance about the real problems on the platform. So anyway, we'll see how this all unfolds. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.